There we go. Okay. Well, good evening, good afternoon. Call to order the Village Council. This is a special meeting of the Village Council today on January 26th. We obviously had some weather difficulties in the recent past, and so this special meeting will include items from both the January 9th regular meeting and the January 9th work session, which we had to reschedule due to hazardous weather conditions. So let us begin first by having one of our distinguished residents lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask U.S. Army retired Colonel John Vann, who graduated from West Point in 1965 with his twin brother. You can imagine that. And spent 26 years in the Army and combat service in Vietnam. So, John, I think you're familiar with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please lead us. Please rise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an honor. Please join me in saying our Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. And now, probably the main attraction for tonight, we will now move to swear in the newest member of the Pinehurst Village Council. I think many of you are aware that Mr. Jack Farrell, who's known to many, was selected by the council to fill the vacant seat left by my election to the position of mayor. So I'm going to ask Jack and his able assistant, his wife, who's also active in the community, here she is, to take the oath. Welcome, Jack. This is not your first rodeo, as the saying goes. You were once before sworn in to fill in a vacant seat at the council. If there's anything you'd like to share with the visitors and the council members, please do.
Well, I don't have any official report for the 4 minutes that I've been on council. But I'd like to thank council for their confidence in me to be able to help out for the next couple of years. I appreciate it very much, and I will do my best to make sure I don't disappoint. Thank you very much.
Well, welcome. Now let's turn to reports. We'll begin with the village manager, Jeff Sanborn.
Thank you, Patrick. I have nothing to report tonight.
Okay. I do have a few things that I wanted to report on that I think will be that I found interesting in this week or two where we were out of pocket. One of the things that I noticed, and it was sent to me by several people, is that Zillow that website we occasionally all visit, determined that the most popular retirement town in the country right now is Pinehurst. Now, yeah, well, a few uh-ohs. But anyway, it's just one of those things. You hear that, you see it, and then you say, oh, well, I think we know that here. But so congratulations, Pinehurst, I think. I'd also like to note that the North Carolina League of Municipalities is going to have a town and state dinner that they're going to hold in Pinehurst on March 27th. They've notified their members. So as we get more details, we'll share it with the village residents. But some of you may be active with the North Carolina League of Municipalities. But we welcome them ahead of time to the village of Pinehurst. The other item I wanted to mention is that there are some meetings that are coming up and some that we've had recently. We'll be meeting tomorrow with the newly established the Sand Hills Metropolitan Planning Organization. We received a green light from the Secretary of Transportation, and so the group's inaugural meeting will officially take place Thursday here, and we look forward to that organization and working with our neighboring communities to address some of those issues that we face here in the area. And upcoming, we also have one of the Tri-Cities meetings coming up with us, Aberdeen and Southern Pines, and our Neighborhood Advisory Committee meeting will be coming up, I believe, next week. Am I right about that? Yes. So we look forward to that. We have an expanded Neighborhood Advisory Committee and some new members. So on that note, I'll turn to my fellow council members.
Just what time is the MPO meeting?
I think it's 10 o'clock on Thursday.
Sounds right.
Yeah. I think it's regularly scheduled here at 10 o'clock. Yeah. I think it's a certain Thursday of each month, matter of fact. I think we've put that down on the calendar.
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, okay. And I'll turn to Dr. Morgan. Any comments, any reports you have?
Just a couple. It's been a while since we've met in a council meeting. Of course, we've had other types of meetings going on. Been typically a quieter time, but had a lot going on with the holidays and also with New Year's. And just a compliment to the staff on preparing the village and getting us through a lot of that. I think that our village looked great. Also, just as we're kicking back off now into the new year, the Central Regional Pines will also be kicking off in there. I think the first meeting should be next month for that, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Taylor.
Two things. First of all, Barb and I both attended our statutorily required training session with the North Carolina School of Government, the Code School. That was this past Thursday and Friday, including our mandatory 2 hours of ethics training. I thought it was a very good presentation covering a range of topics from accounting and financial back-checking to contracting, conflicts of interest, a range of topics. I thought several of the presenters were absolutely outstanding. It was unfortunate that they all couldn't have been at that level, but really terrific content from the formal part of the program. And then maybe as important, the opportunity to meet with other newly elected people. I happen to sit with the newly elected mayor of Hamlet, just down the road. She's been on their planning and zoning board for a number of years, but this was her first attempt at elective office. Another councilwoman from the town of Wake Forest. They have a series of traffic-related issues dissimilar to ours, other than no one's really exactly sure what to do, having to do with US 1 going right through town there. And they had a forum the title of which was Things I Wish I'd Known Then. And they had the existing mayor of Cornelius and a past mayor of his town, the name of which just went out of my head, both of whom actually work with the North Carolina League of Municipalities. And it was interesting talking with them about how they incorporate new members, such as into their councils. In the case of Cornelius, they had the entire council there, not all of whom had just been elected, but they all went and participated in the program. So valuable to have some relationships in other governing bodies. The other thing that I would mention just briefly was for personal education. I met this morning with Matt McKirahan to get a better understanding of our, I'll call it the balanced scorecard, but the entire process that leads to that. What I thought was going to be 30 minutes turned into almost 90. I'm sure I can be smarter still, but I'm smarter than I used to be, and I thank Matt for his time. He obviously understands this in great detail. And so thanks to him for helping me out there. That's it.
Thank you. Barbara Ficklin, any comments?
So as John mentioned, I too attended the School of Government program on municipalities. I found it fascinating. 2 days chock full of information, 100 participants, all sharing different ideas from different places in North Carolina. I found a couple of things really interesting. There was a session, it was actually a breakaway session, where we took a look at the roles of the staff and the council going through the process, starting with strategic planning and going through more administrative functions and showing how these functions are shared and percent essentially of responsibility in each of those functions. And I found that fascinating, and I have a chart that went with it with me. The other thing that I really enjoyed was the last part, the last day of the program. We actually did a little case study, and it was based on a handout that they gave each of us, which is called Public Values Compass. And essentially, what they say is that every decision that we make involves taking a look at 4 competing values. So they're not necessarily compatible, but they need to be viewed in every decision that we make. And those are, interestingly, liberty, community, equity, and prosperity. And given those, we were then divided into groups and worked on a case study and found out how difficult it is to, and challenging it is, to put all of those values together. But that's our job. And so our pledge to you is to make sure we do that in every decision that we make, to make it as fair as possible. So that's a summary of the municipalities program. In addition to that, I can promise you I have been to numerous planning meetings, onboarding meetings, planning and zoning meetings. So I've spent my first 34 days taking in as much information as I possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. I'll turn to our newest member, Jack Farrell.
Now been 14 minutes and I have nothing further to
Nothing
report, but I
further.
appreciate it.
Yeah, we were expecting a lot more from you. Okay.
I understand.
Very disappointing.
Yes, okay. All right, let us go on to item 5 on our agenda. That is the consent agenda. It's a crowded agenda, more so than in the past, because there are 6 meetings or items related to the consent agenda, which really is approval of minutes. And these encompass the pre-retreat meeting, the organizational meeting, a regular meeting, a work session, a special meeting, the 2 special meetings. So I'll ask members if they have any issues or anything they want to raise there. Otherwise, I'll seek a motion if anyone has one.
I would just mention one thing, having kicked off a little bit of a discussion around the minutes of, I think, the December 15th meeting. one of the topics that was covered in the School of Government was what the nature of minutes are supposed to be. And it's very different here for the council than it was, say, for historic preservation. I think, Jeff, your explanation was spot on. They provided some additional, almost statutory background for why that is. So we will come back to the issue around when we talk about other things, but in terms of the minutes, I'm perfectly satisfied with them as they are.
Okay, any other comments? Anybody have a suggestion on a motion?
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a
Second.
second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all opposed? Hearing none, all those minutes the consent agenda are approved. Thank you. Let us go on to item 6. This is Resolution 24-04, reappointing Mr. Matt Jones to the Planning and Zoning Board and the Board of Adjustment.
Maybe I could ask Matt and Jeremy to come forward in case any of you have questions or you'd like to have a conversation.
Just while they're coming up,
Yes.
this is Resolution 24-04. Were there resolutions 01, 02, and 03 that
Well, probably the last time we met. No?
we didn't meet in, we haven't met in 24?
Yes.
Fiscal year.
Takes care of that. Jeremy?
Sure.
Want to reintroduce Matt to us?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for hearing us today in our request of your approval to reappoint Matt Jones to the Planning and Zoning Board meeting. He is a key board member for us. Over his first 3 years with us, he has held himself to a very high regard as far in terms of professionalism and integrity. He is key to our knowledge base of the board, given his experience in engineering. And I hope that my email earlier last week gave you a little bit of insight to Matt personally. And I'm sorry, Mr. Farrell, but I, as I mentioned earlier, I think you kind of know some of that of Matt already.
Right.
So I know the request today is for a 2-year reappointment, and that being policy. However, I would also support a 10-year for Matt if you would entertain that. But other than that, I'll turn it over to you. So.
Okay. Any questions from members of the council for Matt Jones or Jeremy? None? Okay. Well, then the resolution is before us for 2 years?
I will say that
Go ahead.
my experience with Matt is a terrific asset for both the Planning Board and the Board of Adjustment, and he's just been one of the solid players for many years. His advice, counsel, and the way he's able to kind of mold a decision is really fantastic. I think he's a fabulous asset. I'd be honored to be able to make the resolution.
Go ahead.
I move to reappoint Mr. Matt Jones to the Planning and Zoning Board and Board of Adjustment effective February 1st, 2024, serving at the pleasure of council until the end of his term on January 31st, 2026.
You have a motion?
Second?
Second, motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So be it. Welcome.
Thanks for your
Back.
service, Matt.
Thanks again, and thank you, Jack.
Now, we go on to the next item, which is Resolution 2405, and that's appointing Mr. Terry Lertz as the Neighborhood Advisory Committee Representative for the Linden Road West area. I thought I saw Terry in here. Maybe I didn't.
I don't think Terry made it. We were expecting him to be here today. Something must have come up.
I know I saw him over the weekend, church. Okay.
But we do have a vacancy, obviously, to fill there on the NEC for that particular neighborhood. Terry was the only applicant. We did interview him and found him to be terrifically well-suited, given his background and love for the community. And so I would recommend you go ahead and make this appointment. I think most of you know Terry from his time serving on the HPC.
Yes, I know him from that time period myself, so I have high regard for Terry. Is there, anybody have any hesitation in proceeding that way? If not, I'll accept a motion.
I would, having served with him either 1 or 2 terms, I've forgotten on HPC, I would be happy to see him serve in that capacity.
All right,
Be happy to, I move to appoint Mr. Terry Lertz to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee as the representative for the Linden Road West area, effective January 16th, with said term expiring January 31st, 2026.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting this, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So be it. Resolution 2405 has been adopted. Okay, item 8. Moving right along here. This is a discussion of a road closure request from the Golf Channel and USGA during the U.S. Open of 2024. Doug Willerton,
Yeah,
you want to lead us in this?
Yes, thank you. So as you know, the USGA approached the village and asked us if we would be interested in accommodating the Golf Channel's request. And we appreciate them coming to us and offering the opportunity. It's definitely a unique opportunity for the village. At our last meeting, council directed me to survey our downtown business community, which I've done. So I reached out either by email or in person to all of our downtown business community. And I had 39 responses, 22 of which said they were not interested in closing the downtown area for vehicle traffic and creating the pedestrian-only district. So that's 56% of the people that responded. As such, I recommend that we do not move forward with creating the pedestrian-only district, and we do leave it open to vehicular traffic during the U.S. Open. And I talked with the USGA, and they said that if we move forward with this direction, the Golf Channel will broadcast from the course, which is what they typically do anyway. And as a staff, we will work with the local business community and others to try to encourage visitors to come to our historic downtown and enjoy it and shop at our businesses and help the whole downtown community.
Would anyone like to discuss this matter? Let me begin then by just saying I think it's in the best interest of our residents, our visitors, certainly our shopkeepers and merchants downtown, that our streets remain open during the course of the U.S. Open, particularly for all the visitors we have coming here and all those shopkeepers that hope to experience a nice increase in traffic to their businesses, whether it be retail or restaurant. I do want us to continue to work with the Golf Channel and USGA, because there may be some alternatives of which we may have some input with. But I think I certainly talked with some business owners, and based on the survey that Doug did, it sort of validated my initial instincts. So I'm in favor of denying the request, but I want to hear from my colleagues.
Doug, do I understand that the Golf Channel basically said it's that location or nothing? They're not interested in discussing alternatives?
Yeah, that's what they said. I mean, they don't want to be a burden to the village, and they want to work closely with us, but they basically said, if this area is not going to work, we'll just go do it on the course.
I would also say that I didn't attempt to conduct my own survey, but in the course of being in the village for other business, if an owner was there, I did ask them. I came away with the same sense. And the two salient comments came out of that. One was on behalf of someone who does not belong to the Business Owners Association, to remember that there are a meaningful number of businesses anytime issues like this come up, and to not just think about what that group might say. Secondly, I thought this was kind of interesting. Someone said, well, who's watching the Golf Channel at 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night? Mostly they're golfers. And most golfers already know about Pinehurst. So the idea that someone would see that backdrop and say, gee, I got to go to Pinehurst, I don't want to say there wouldn't be any but probably at the end of the day, that might be fairly marginal. So I also would be on the side of not approving the request.
Yes, Dr. Morgan, your comment?
I support that opinion. A couple other points, I echo what John found there. The idea that when you say it's not going to be a burden, I think it would be a burden. I have no problem discussing other ways and potentially other venues that will not shut the area down. I walked around on a couple different days to talk with property owners, and the specific reason I go down there was just to talk with them. And it was about 3/4 of the folks had an opinion of no, and then the ones who did have yes, it was kind of like, well, not really sure, maybe type. But other folks who had been through this with previous opens, in which I think it was a couple opens ago, where there was a shutdown, they indicated that there was a significant decrease in business. And we need to be supporting our business as much as possible to preserve our community in that regard. One other thing I would throw out is that the survey results, we got a grand total, I guess, of 34 is listed there. You said 39 total?
Yeah, it was open a few more days after I
Okay.
wrote the memo. Yeah.
One of the things I encountered on there was many of the business owners said, I never got it. And so the question was, did it go to your junk, that kind of stuff, and is it an email type of thing? I think this is one more example. We need to probably relook how we are asking the business owners downtown, and is our email list good? Do we need to do other ways? Do we need to walk around some, that kind of thing? But I think we can probably get better representation with relooking our survey process. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara?
I talked to a business owner who was here for the last open to get an opinion, and that opinion was, don't close the streets. I think that it is a tremendous inconvenience for residents as well as business owners and those who work downtown, so I would not support.
A number of people that I've talked to unofficially is that they were pretty negative on the idea. One thing that I haven't heard anyone bring up, but it sounds like a logistical difficulty. There's a lot of logistics to closing the downtown and then getting people in there, and then where do people park that actually do want to come downtown, or where the people that actually work downtown, how they would get in and out of the village. There's more logistics, I think, than what meets the eye for something like this. So I think negatively, most people are negatively inclined to this type of thing.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I just want to actually thank the USGA for bringing the opportunity forward. I mean, even from the beginning, it may not have been something we were interested in, but just that they were willing to ask us and get our feedback. I appreciate that we have that good working relationship with them.
I just want to comment. I see a hand in the audience. We're going to go to public comments within a couple of items rather than take a public comment now. Okay, thank you. All right, having heard from all members of the council, is there a motion at hand?
I move to deny the downtown road closure request from the USGA Golf Channel for the duration of the 2024 U.S. Open.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of denying signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, action is concluded denying the request. Thank you. The ordinance on the GASB budget, Dana, there you are.
Good afternoon, Council. I come to you again today with another opportunity to talk about GASB 96, which involves IT software subscriptions and required accounting for that under the government accounting standards. In July, the council had adopted the budget amendment that allowed us to properly record the subscriptions that we knew of at that point in time, where we knew the dollar amounts and what exactly we were purchasing, and that we had contracts for to ensure that this accounting standard did apply to that subscription. Since then, we have 2 additional software subscriptions where we now have contracts, and we were able to evaluate the terms and determine that this accounting standard does apply. And so we need to do the budget amendment to accommodate the capital outlay to recognize the software asset as well as the other financing source for the liability that essentially is funding that asset, which we pay via debt service over the life of the contract. Those two software subscriptions are for the solid waste routeware system, which was planned in the budget. Just at the time we were developing the budget last spring, again, we did not know who the vendor was going to be, what the dollar amount was going to be, so we were not able to budget it in the exact accounts for the amounts that we needed it. Now we have that information, so the budget amendment will correct that. The other is for a new strategy software system. That one, we will have it in service in FY24, but will not start making payments until FY25. So there's no debt service payments starting until next fiscal year, so we'll be able to budget for those appropriately when developing the FY25 budget. The remainder of the budget amendment relates to 3 subscriptions for the police department. We included the capital outlay budget in the July budget amendment. But at the time, we were expecting that we would be paying those fully in advance. Therefore, there would be no liability. The timing of the actual payments worked out that we made it several weeks after those subscriptions were placed into service. And I did discuss that with our auditors. Even though it is a very short time frame, we do still actually have to record the liability and then the debt service payment of principal and about $20 of interest each. So in order to comply with those requirements and meet our auditors' expectations for how we account for that, all of those elements are included in this budget amendment.
Any questions for Dana?
My only question was, this is apparently beyond the capability or the authority of the village manager, which unfortunately, which could have taken care of this very easily without an ordinance change. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes, that's correct. So since it's more than $25,000 and we have funds moving essentially between departments because of the debt service being separate from the other departmental appropriations in the budget ordinance, it is not within the manager's threshold to approve.
Okay.
Dana, I was surprised to see the concept of principal and interest here. Is that strictly a GASB definition? I mean, I understand we have a liability, it's 3 years or whatever it is, but I was surprised. They really break this down into principal and interest?
Yes, yes.
That's just
That's
a-
the way the standard is written,
That's
yes.
just deep in the GASB.
Yep,
As a practical matter, we make a monthly payment. It's whatever
correct.
it is.
Most of these are annual payments. I believe the routeware is going to be quarterly payments, so we're making them on the regular frequency based on the payment amount that the vendor specifies. We internally just have to break that down for these certain subscriptions to which it applies as principal and interest. Yes.
Any other comments? No. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 24-02 GASB 96 budget amendment and ordinance amending ordinance 2314 appropriating funds for operations of the Village of Pinehurst for fiscal year 2024.
There's a motion.
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 10, review and approve the FY 2025 balanced scorecard, including the FY 25 area of focus and FY 25 to 29 initiative action plans. Jeff, Matt, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's nice to see you all again. So, yes, today we bring before you the FY25 balanced scorecard, which includes the recommended areas of focus that came forward through our strategic planning retreats in December. And then the goal today is to get your feedback on those items, talk through them, and hopefully affirm the FY 2025 the FY 2025 balanced scorecard, and then also by consensus, get a direction on the initiative action plan items that are designed from FY 2025 through FY 2029. And so since there are two separate parts, I think it's going to be easiest for us to talk through first the balanced scorecard and the areas of focus. And as you can see, and as people behind us as well can see on the screen, there are multiple areas that we look at when we look at the areas of focus in particular. We're looking at both the strategic advantages and challenges, or opportunities and challenges that council identified during our strategic planning retreat process, and then also looked at our areas of performance gaps. Those are benchmark communities that we look at within the village and see where we're 5% or more below those benchmark communities. And then we also look at our community survey results and see where we have high dissatisfaction. So those areas of highest dissatisfaction over 20%. And so we take those items, and again, I know this is a reminder for you all on council and for Jack, as we talked earlier today about this, that we then looked at the matrix, and during the strategic planning retreat process, you all affirmed at that time 3 areas of focus. And those 3 areas of focus are to deliver effective fire and rescue services, to ensure codes and ordinances protect the character of village neighborhoods, and to provide a safe and effective multimodal transportation system. As you can see on the items that are in your backup, the FY 2025 Balanced Scorecard has those 3 areas of focus highlighted in red. What you'll also notice on the Balanced Scorecard this year that is slightly different than years past is that once we've talked through those goals, we talked through the strategic objectives, the KPI descriptions during the strategic planning retreat, we then looked at our FY 23 actual numbers, our FY 24 estimates, and then, as I mentioned, a slight difference this year from last year. This year, based off of what we've heard from council, we provided short-term and long-term projections instead of goals. Now, the one thing I want to caveat here is the reason why we provided projections here is that as staff, as senior level staff, we sat together and said, okay, as council, you all have provided us with this direction with opportunities for improvement and innovation, changes to timelines and dates based off of the strategic planning retreat conversation. And we've built in where we believe is applicable potential short-term and long-term projections based off of the guidance that you all have provided for us. So those are the numbers that you see before you today. And a part of this meeting is also to discuss what those if you have any questions about those projections, I'm more than happy to talk through the methodology in general, or also on specific ones if you have that. But this time is open to you all to ask any questions that you all may have regarding the FY25 proposed balanced scorecard.
Yes, I have a few items I want to raise. First of all, I believe the feedback from the council members, I recall, was not to change goals to projections in the emails exchange. We for years have used goals here. That is, that's sort of standard operating procedure. In my previous life, we always said goals. Goals and projections are 2 distinct things, at least in my mind, in the performance manager area. Goals are an objective, an aim of an organizational unit. A projection is a forecast. And I think we should stick with setting goals as an organization. We like to call ourselves, and I think accurately so, a high-performance performing organization. And I think a high-performing organization should have goals rather than projections.
So I'll jump in. Maybe we have a misunderstanding. I thought that the feedback that we got from council members via email on this subject included dissension from one council member on that particular topic. So we didn't change it in the drafts, recognizing that we would have the conversation here. If you want to call it goals, I think that's certainly okay. We thought that it might be helpful to our community to call them projections rather than goals because of the certain cases where recognizing that we are projecting a downward trend in some of these areas and making the conscious decision not to apply additional resources to change that trend, that it can be confusing to some of our members of our communities to call something a goal that is a declining trend. So that's what we're trying to address. So if you want to still call that a goal, I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I want to hear what my colleagues say, but I do believe there's a distinction between a goal and a projection. And we've always used the term goal, and I don't think it's created much confusion. It's not on my part, and I don't think on many people in the village. And so I think to change after years of using goal to a projection would signify an unnecessary change. So that's my thoughts on that use of that word.
Another way of potentially looking at this as well,
And let me add one other
Yes,
thing.
sir.
There may be instances where a goal that a program director in charge of one of the objectives and responsible for the tracking the KPI and so forth, may be able to make a case that a future goal should be less than a previous achievement. I think we should, as a rule of thumb, our goal should be better than or greater than or equal to our most recent actual achievement. But there can be exceptions, and I'm sure they would pop up from time to time, and I think they would make a healthy discussion among council and staff as to why we should change those.
I think that sentiment is just about right, but I would like to add an additional observation. We know that we have a margin for error in our annual survey data, right? So to the extent that these goals are being derived from survey data or from reflection of survey data, those things are going up and down because of a margin of error. So what we have done is, rather than say the goal has to be the same as or greater than last year's performance, except in those certain cases where we can think logically about why it's going down, we used a three-year average?
Yes,
Rolling
Our average survey results over the last 3 years.
in most instances, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I do note, because I have made an effort to go back and look at our performance scorecards and see why we've done this. I think people, certainly Matt and others, are aware of that. And I did recognize that the actual of FY23 versus the FY29, there wasn't what I would call sort of large gaps, whereas in the past, I would see those, which would trigger in me with the question of why. And which has really what got me interested in the issue. So I recognize the numeric, what I'll call consistency of trying to have a future goal equal to or greater than or very, very close to the most recent actual achievement we have. So I thank you for that.
I think that's the genesis of kind of this whole conversation, though, and I appreciate you identifying that, because bottom line is, if we have a metric, a projection or a goal, which is a metric that we're shooting for, okay, and yes, there is variability, just in the survey data, which makes your margin of error, so you don't know if you're going up a little bit, down a little bit, but if it's in a range that says, hey, this is great performance on a benchmark overall, that's a reasonable thing to achieve. And then the next year, it may be very reasonable to achieve the same thing without necessarily having to go up. So the fact you recognize that, I think that will put this to bed, because the genesis of the whole conversation was sometimes the metric is the metric where it's good, and we're already attaining it, and it's good for next year also.
And I do think it would be worthwhile if we compare FY23 and then we look at 29, and the recommendation is that our goal is not going to reach that achievement, I think it's a good discussion to have, because there's probably a very reasonable explanation as to why that's the case. But I think as council members and residents, they don't know why. So
The reason is because this is a reflection of the 5-year plan we're building. So this is all built off the priorities that you set during the retreat. The initiative action plans that we were working toward adoption and approval from you, and the longer list of opportunities for innovation and improvement.
John?
A couple of things. The reason that a particular number might be less in the future than in the past is not necessarily, it might be margin of error because we do sample. We don't survey everyone. But it is also because we don't survey everyone, because we attempt to get different people, different years. Let me take one example, satisfaction with neighborhood street lighting. You might survey me and I might be very happy, and next year we survey you and you're not happy. And so that swings a great deal. That has nothing to do with margin of error, has the fact that it's actually a different sample. We hope over time that
That is the
evens
margin
out.
of error.
Pardon me?
That's what
the
drives, that's
definition of
what
margin.
creates the margin of error.
Margin of error to me is the fact that if you get 700 responses out of 18,000 residents, you're not going to know with certainty what the number is. And there's variability around that of 2 or 3%, whatever the statistical measure is. But when you survey different people, different years, you can get different results that are not just margin of error. They can be because it's a different sample. Bottom line is, I agree with Pat that without becoming overly semantic, a goal and a projection are two different things. I think we have a wonderful system to measure progress against a variety of benchmarks. And that is, as Matt explained to me today, some of what goes into this is explicitly, if I remember, 2 of the 4 are explicitly statistical measures of where either satisfaction is, achievement is 5% below our goal, or dissatisfaction is 20% or higher as measured by the survey. I think those are the.
As part of our areas of focus conversation.
Right. So I do think my view would be to retain the concept of goals as what we're trying to achieve, and projections, which sometimes we project what we might achieve. That would be my view.
Thank you.
If I may, real quick,
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
for further clarification, one of the conversations that we've also had is these projections allow you all as council to also see and potentially ask questions about why, again, areas may go up or down, why we've maybe built into that forecasting different elements. So for instance, if you see an item that we may not be to council's liking, if we're projecting 85% in an area and council says as a whole, we really want to focus and we really want that to be at 90%, then as staff, we would take that as a goal that we would set with that key performance indicator, and we would go as a part of the budget conversation to see what elements we can, what potential opportunities for improvement and innovation, what other types of projects that we could identify that we believe may help us to achieve that 90%, knowing that the current projection, which may be no new resource allocation within the current plan, projects us at 85%. So this is also partially for you all to look at this and be able to share your insights into whether or not you have any questions about what those projections are, if those projections have any concerns or issues with you all as a council, and where we need to focus potentially as a part of the budgetary conversation to increase either satisfaction or decrease our response times or what have you. This is that starting part of that conversation. If this plan, as it is, hypothetically, meets your expectations, then in many ways, our goal within the organization is going to be to try to make sure that we achieve what we have forecasted. Right? Our goal will be to make sure that we meet these numbers that we have provided in front of you.
Barbara, did you have a comment?
That by definition is a goal, in my
Then
opinion.
that's what I'm saying, and that's why that shift would happen.
I think that I see projections and goals as two totally different things for one reason. A projection is something that you look at that, based on circumstances around, will happen, but not necessarily under your control. If you set a goal, then you are committing to try to achieve that goal.
Agreed.
So it's a responsibility issue for me. I would say stay with budget.
And if I may, I will say, I absolutely agree with you, and I think that that's a part of the conversation. Again, if you all as council look at this and say, percent of residents satisfied with the quality of new residential development, long-term projection is showing 80%. And if that is, as a council, you all are wish to see that increase, then that increase, what we will do as staff, and I would actually ask you right now during this meeting as well, is how would you request us as staff to look at potentially trying to achieve that increased goal to close that 5% gap or to meet that 5% increase.
I think one of the things that will most likely go into at least my decision part of this process is the historical background of what are the actual numbers that we've had in the past on that. And we have terrific historical data because we've done this for years. So that would be very helpful. Jack, did you have any comments?
I have no problem with the balanced scorecard. I think it contains both goals and projections. And they're in different categories. For example, obviously, a projection is the total general fund balance as a percent of actual expenditures. That's a projection based upon all the assumptions made and the financial data and so forth. It's an obvious projection. I mean, it's a reality. Whereas many of them are also goals. So we have a little combination. We have some goals and we have some projections. And I think mixing the two is not a problem, as long as we recognize that, as Matt said, if we feel that some of the goals, the items that are obviously goals, are insufficient as a goal, then we ought to relay that information. Otherwise, it's more than satisfactory. My only question would be there's very few that are less than today's expectations that are goal-oriented. There's only one really that varies considerably. That would be the only one that I would have a question about. Other than that, I think it's makes a lot of sense.
I have no problem with the use of the term goal on there. Again, this is a management tool that just looks at it as saying if you're out of whack in a certain arena, you need to put some attention to that and possible resources to it, and that's why we're using it. I guess, again, back to the genesis of the conversation, from my memory, was that just because if let's say our goal is 95% and we get 96%, that doesn't mean next year it needs to be 98%, because maybe 95%. We'd look at them individually.
There's something, as in football, to use a football terminology, something within the 40-yard lines as how we would look at these. But there
we
are,
look at each one. So I think the use of goal is fine.
yeah, yes. John, did you have another comment? No.
Not at
Okay.
the generic level, no.
Gotcha. All right, let me go back to another topic. I was trying to gauge when the three strategic objectives. I wanted to just do a quick take on that once more.
The areas of focus, just for clarification, is that what you're asking
I'm going
for,
under strategic objectives, ensure codes and ordinances protect the character of village neighborhoods. In goal 2 and goal 1, deliver effective fire and rescue services.
Yes.
And what I'm trying to make sure I understand is that, and this is sort of really a question, should we be focusing more on the areas where we seem to be doing not as well as we might like to, rather than the areas where we hit it out of the ballpark consistently year over year over year, whether it's fire and rescue services for one, comes to mind, police services for another. We are at, we're at 100 actually in 23 on the most recent year. So I'm trying to understand as a village, are we giving ourselves the strategic objective that we know we're going to really succeed at?
Absolutely, and that's a good question. And so, and for further clarification on this, the key performance indicators that are assigned and that council has directed us to use for these goals are one element for how we know that we are achieving our goals and our strategic objectives. However, in order to identify the areas of focus, we have a different methodology. And that methodology mostly hinges on, in two ways, what council has said are opportunities and those external challenges, those issues that are affecting us externally, as well as then our benchmark data where we're underperforming and where there's high dissatisfaction. So for instance, when you bring up deliver effective fire and rescue services, when looking at high levels of dissatisfaction in the community survey, none of them scored within that area. However, under the performance gap, so looking at ourselves compared to applicable benchmarks, it did have 2 items that related to that. There were 3 items that were under strategic challenges, so items that council, you all have identified as challenges during the strategic retreat, planning retreat, aligned with that item, and then one under opportunity. So at that moment, there were 6 different elements when looking at that 4x4 matrix that aligned with potentially making deliver effective fire and rescue services an area of focus. And when looking at the scores across all strategic objectives, that was the 3rd highest total, for lack of a better term, total vote getter out of those 4x4, where we said this may be an area to focus on. So we're trying our best to say it's not just one area. It's not just dissatisfaction within the community. It's not just benchmarking underperformance. It's a plethora of different options there within those 4 categories to try to help us identify an area of focus, which also helps us to identify potential blind spots, right? So a lot of times we do talk about dissatisfaction or where we're underperforming. This helps us to see a little bit more holistically in alignment also, again, with what council has directed as opportunities and challenges.
Any other thoughts? Because I have some other questions on some of the other bullets.
I'm not sure whether this is the time on the areas of focus. Some of them, which you handed out the day I was
Yes, sir.
zooming in, but I now have, there are a number that make specific reference back to other data items or other elements of the review process, and some that don't. There's several that have no reference back to that, but they're still, in theory, an area of focus. And I would think that maybe under the mantra of continuously improve and innovate, looking at some subset of those things where we are maybe not underperforming, where dissatisfaction is not 20%, but areas which are the largest areas of underperformance is a worthwhile thing to do. I don't know exactly where that plugs in to this.
If I may, John, are you recommending that we have a potential other element within that, instead of those 4, including a 5th one that talks about, did I hear historically underperforming, or I'm trying to understand what you mean by the what that other element is that you're looking for. Can you help me to understand?
Somewhere I would think it would make sense, instead of focusing on the 17 or 18 things that were getting better, to look at the larger subset of things that were not getting better. We can't look at all of them, there are too many, but to have a formal way of looking at those, to identify those that maybe where not only if we were able to improve, it would be tangible, it'd be measurable. It's not going from 95 to 97, or something like that. And that process, I would think, is part of continuously improving or innovating or managing professionally managing a high-performing organization. Looking at where you may be falling short is as important as looking at where you are succeeding.
And I would ask.
Sure. Again, even after our 90 minutes today, I'm not sure where to plug that in, but I don't think it should be
Well,
lost.
let me make a suggestion. The 2023 Community Survey Areas for Improvement, what were the high levels of dissatisfaction greater than 20%?
Yes, so just for the reference for council, this is on the back of the area of focus mapping in your FY25 strategic planning retreat binder, where there were 10 items. I don't have the full number of them, but I just know they're greater than 20%, is the adequacy of street lighting, the ease of travel on NC Highway 5, the ease of travel through the large traffic circle, the availability of walkways, the quality of new residential and commercial development, availability of affordable housing, the enforcing mowing, cutting of weeds and grass on private property, prohibiting oversized vehicles in residential neighborhoods, and quality of leadership provided by elected officials.
Do those overlap with the 77 items that were identified in the ETC survey where we did not equal, in the short-term trend analysis, where we did not improve or equal where we were in 2022 during 2023?
I would have to go back and do that cross-reference. This is merely saying total dissatisfaction. Technically, if an item received negative or 25 points of dissatisfaction last year, but then 23 points this year, it technically would have increased by 2, so it wouldn't be on that list. But this is solely those who chose either somewhat dissatisfied or very dissatisfied within each question.
No. Any other comments on this?
I just want to reiterate, thing on Matt said there is that the different KPIs, the key performance indicators, that we're agreeing on the metrics we're using to assess whether we've met our goals or not, and that's that's part of the balanced scorecard here. And when you mentioned before about things we're doing well in, we may be doing well in one area of metrics or one, let's say, a survey, maybe patient satisfaction, or not, excuse me, patient satisfaction, but the community satisfaction is very high on there, but we're looking at some other metrics also that are not necessarily as good. And so the specifics on there, when you're talking about the fire and rescue, we've got outstanding satisfaction. I'm very proud of our fire department, but we're not meeting a national metric benchmark on response time in certain parts of our community. And it's not because our firemen aren't sliding down the poles and getting in their boots fast enough and getting on the trucks. It's a matter that the distance is too far, and so we're not meeting those metrics. And so that is another KPI that's put into that says we need to look at that also. And so when you ask about, make sure we're addressing things we're not meeting, it's not just about satisfaction. It's also about other metrics we use in our community that say, hey, we are responding quick enough, or we're doing certain things that need to be happened. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Jeff, I think that's a great point, because on one hand, we, council or the department, have identified that we are falling short in a way that the public has not identified that. They're very happy with the service we're providing, but we're looking at a way to make that better based on a nationally available benchmark, and that we're falling short of, and I think that's part of our role.
I agree. I think this falls into the definition of being proactive.
Absolutely.
Along those lines, I would really like us in the performance area to find a way to focus and maybe cross-tab the top 12 and versus the 77 that declined, and figured out where all that overlapping is. Because when we were presented in September with that short-term trend analysis data from ETC, where the decline of 82% of the items that were surveyed was shocking to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was an even close call, and the few that we increased, some of those we counted them as either increased or remained the same, and then there were 77 items that declined. So that's a lot, and we do have to rate and sort of rank them and see where they overlap. But I think that would be, to me, one of the most helpful things for us to focus on as a community, that we can raise the level of satisfaction of our residents, because the rating and ranking of these items came from our residents, as opposed to just be my opinion or something else, or any council member. So I would, I like us to find a way to do that as we continue to polish this up going forward. The topic of code enforcement is one that comes to my mind. I went back to the 2017, I don't think I brought it with me, the 2017 ETC Institute survey. And it was remarkable to this, I'm not going to say identical, that's too powerful a word, but the very, very strong similarities between what our residents were saying then and what they're saying now. And I think we got to find a way to impact that, because they keep saying the same things to a large degree. And they give us credit for a lot of stuff, but they're consistent. Our residents are very consistent. They consistently say, you guys are doing a great job here, and they consistently say, this is lacking. So I'm trying to figure out a way to make sure we address that.
Would that be a ancillary recommendation associated with the approval of this?
Yeah, I mean, when we get to that point of approval, that is something I would,
It wouldn't be contingent.
no,
It would be-
but I think we need to provide clarity to the staff as a council. And I think we need to do it both in the fiscal aspect, which impacts some things, and in the performance aspect. I think we've made some headway already on the language on goals and projections and so forth. But what I'm not sure about is if we have truly zeroed in on what our residents have continually told us, survey after survey. And we have the benefit of using the same survey firm for, I don't know how long we've used them, because when you go back, thank them, they're asking the same questions. And that is wonderful for data analysis.
And I
If I-
think, oh, sorry, go.
I'm so sorry. If I may, I will say that at minimum, and this was from a council recommendation, to provide that full list of short-term trends, positive and negative, as well as long-term in the upcoming
Yes.
reports. So
No,
at minimum, we will have that on the front end when we get those reports from the from ETC Institute this year. And I do think that we can, I'm happy to take that back and talk through how we may potentially be able to.
I made that request. Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that.
But I think that I'm happy to take that back as well, because I do think it is valuable, and trying to find a way that make that valuable within our process, I think is something that I'm happy to entertain and try to find where it may be best suited moving forward.
Okay, thank you. John?
I was just going to say that Jeff Sanborn in one of the email exchanges raised the idea that we have a schedule to keep in order to be sure we develop a budget and so forth. And I don't think this is important enough to derail that this year, but I would hope that perhaps for next year, this concept would get plugged formally into this very elaborate and high-quality mechanism that we have to figure out where we are, where do we want to go, and are we getting there, or are we not? So it may be too heavy a lift to do it this year as part of approving this, but I think it should be formalized, and maybe the way to do it is to be sure that it gets into next year's.
On a related note, as Matt, Doug, and I were talking about this, what to do about these goals a couple of weeks ago, we recognized another improvement that we can make is early on in the strategic planning process to present you formally with these projections. So you can look at the projections at that early in the strategic planning process and say, that's a problem, we need to set a higher goal. And that can be an input as we're talking together in the strategic retreat framework about things that can address those shortfalls.
And resources are not infinite, and maybe the resources necessary to get there have to be thought through.
Right, it's not a great forum for surprises.
John, I think your recommendations are wise. I think your recommendation there is wise.
Other comments? Barb or Jack?
I guess what concerns me is that the chosen areas of focus are what drive action plans. Yes, initiate action plans. And I see some areas that, based on what I'm hearing from residents, aren't being addressed, and they are immediate concerns. And I'm afraid if we can't add additional areas of focus, that we will be unable to target action plans that will help solve some of our problems.
I think this is also, thank you, Barbara, that I think this may be helpful as well. I kind of skipped over this, but it may be helpful for the people in the audience as well as listening, that the areas of focus help to, in many ways, help us with identifying potential initiative action plans, OFEs, but also really to focus on the next fiscal year's budget when it comes to prioritization, right? So as an example, by looking at this, obviously, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority when looking at the next budget cycle. And so what this does is helps department heads to say, as we're putting together a recommended budget, and as management looks at it, to say, where should those finite resources go? We're going to be looking at how to best address those areas of focus within the next one-year plan. That's not to say that in the out years, every year we ask and we look at this information to see if there are potentially new or different areas of focus. I was just providing that kind of feedback for the people in the room who may want to know what's the role of the areas of focus. But to your point, Barb, I'm happy to, if you have any questions or concerns or thoughts about what potential other areas of focus may be, that's part of this conversation as well.
Maybe to put a finer point on that, given the process that we use, identification of areas of focus does not drive the identification of IEPs. In fact, we have already determined the IEPs and
Yeah.
the greater list of OFIs before you all select the areas of focus. And so what the areas of focus really do is tell us what really, no kidding, needs to be the priority as we're moving forward with the budget and plan development that we craft for you to adopt in the summertime frame.
And I would think,
Particularly capital expenditures.
Sorry?
Particularly capital expenditures, because
Sure.
each one of those area of focus has a related capital
It's
expenditure.
related.
in the plan.
We need to definitely make sure that it makes the cut as we're building this plan.
Exactly.
but I would hope, Barb, at least it would be my opinion, that, let's suppose hypothetically we had no issues, we were all ready to approve this right now, and tomorrow, someone calls you and says, hey, you really got to look at, we as a council can add, they may not be officially on the piece of paper, but that doesn't mean we can't address them if we think they're sufficiently important. That's kind of why we are here, I think, because the world changes.
Comments or topics? I mean, so far we've decided to use goals versus projections. We have 3 areas here of strategic objectives at the moment. I want to make sure
As affirmed by council during the strategic plan.
I want to make sure we want to remain to deliver effective fire and rescue services, ensure codes and ordinances protect the character of village neighborhoods, and provide safe and effective multimodal transportation systems. Anybody have thoughts of which something we should reconsider, something we should amend?
Thinking to the question I had over the minutes and the discussion we had over simplistically fire station versus first response, let's call it first response, non-red, big red truck. Right? Does the language that we have here identified in red as an area of focus, does that carry through to that same line item that I was concerned about that had not reflected what I thought was the discussion we had in the strategic?
The description of the IAP?
Yes.
No, I mean, the IAP supports that area of focus, but we can have the conversation about that title, and it's a different conversation.
Yeah, I think-
Absolutely, yeah. So for the initiative action plan item that we'll be discussing next, that's part of that discussion as well. But I think to the more general question, yes, Jeff is correct. It's the initiative action, all initiative action plans tie up through strategic objectives and goals. That's one of the ways in which we ensure organizational alignment all the way through.
This area of focus reflects in my mind what I think we discussed, which is that, yes, we have a Birdie, and a Birdie talked about a fire station, but we have expanded that in part, or at least in my mind, in great part, because of some of the things that Jeff Morgan brought up about the importance of improving response times for a stroke victim or a cardiac issue. So as long as we are carrying through that idea, and as I recall, the planning item, the actual design item is not for 3 or 4 more fiscal years. As long as we're carrying through this idea, then I'm quite content.
Yeah.
I do think we need to link this discussion with our budget. And that's what is not, we're talking in sort of silos right now. And the strategic performance is a very important silo to me, and I think to other members of the council. But the budget silo, they need to connect. So we know what we are committing fiscally our community on. And so we can address that, we should address it tonight, so that we're not going down one track here and going down another track here. Because otherwise, we'll end up in a situation where our eyes, I guess, are bigger than our stomach. Is that the phrase? And we got to be very careful there.
I thought this was a process, though, that we identify the directions we're going, and then the staff is going to end up addressing this and coming up with proposed budgets on how we're doing
Well,
things.
I'd like to provide some clarity for that budget then, okay? Because I think that's, to my mind, is a disconnect. So,
Okay, what's disconnected for you?
well, here's what I think. I think we need to set some firm guidance on tax rates for the 5-year plan and other budget-related items. I think even though we reduced the property tax rates last year, it still resulted in a property tax increase for our residents of about 10%. So if we plan for a tax increase in a couple of years, which was in a draft, a discussion document, we will increase the likelihood it will occur. In the last few months, it was announced that the North Carolina residents would see an increase in their home insurance rates, their utility rates, and their auto insurance rates. Now, we as a council can do nothing about those 3 items, beyond our control. The only thing we have a control over is our property tax rate. And if you read the newspapers about the costs, possible costs associated with solving the water issue that concerns all of us in Moore County, it's not a parochial issue for Pinehurst, it's going to cost some money. And we're a user, and our residents are going to have to help pitch in. And we know that from projections that we'll probably get some healthy revenue from the sales tax over the next couple of years. And may not be as much as last year, but we know it's going to be pretty good. And I'm willing to bet that in 2 or 3 years, when they do a property tax evaluation again, we're going to get a hike. Our property is going to increase in value in this community. And I don't think it's going to increase by 50% again, but it'll increase. So, and finally, we can't ignore the cruelest tax of all, which is inflation. So I think we need to factor those economic and budget issues into what we plan out in sort of a 5-year view of the world. So I would propose that we provide guidance to staff that the planning for the 5 years should not include any tax increase at this time. I don't know how other council members feel, but I think that's what I think is both a fair and practical guidepost.
I largely agree with everything you said, but I'm a little confused. That, to me, is not part of Agenda Item 10.
Well,
About the balanced scorecard and what have you. It's an important component of the budgeting process.
but it is, but as our conversation was drifting not in a negative way, in a positive way, dollars started to get associated with things. And so that's why I brought up that issue. But we can discuss it later also. But anyway, that is one of the.
I think that's kind of how the plan was. It definitely has to be discussed. I mean, this definitely has to be discussed.
Right.
The budgeting process. That's our job. You know, we have a mandate from the state to make sure we have a balanced budget in everything we're doing. And I have no interest in raising taxes on our citizens right now. I also want to make sure we're delivering the effective services that we're supposed to do.
I agree. I don't think we need to raise taxes.
And so I guess I am seeing this process right now as a balanced scorecard is what we're doing. Looking at right now we're talking about 3 strategic objectives on how we're going to do that. This then plays into the staff developing our budget for us in there. And we're going to have a lot of meetings associated with that, and they are aware that we're not interested in raising taxes on our citizens. But it's also their job to make sure they're bringing up stuff and saying, hey, this is something that needs to be done or doesn't need to be done. And we have to make a decision whether we're going to do it or not.
I think we have an agreement then that we should not have a proposal in our 5-year plan to raise taxes. Now, we can change it because we do this every year. We could raise taxes this year, we could raise them next year. But I think from a policy planning standpoint, staff should be familiar with, as they look at a 5-year horizon, which is an excellent horizon to look over,
Okay.
that we should not build in a tax increase.
We're adding another year of what goes on here,
Say
okay?
again?
We're adding another year for the 5-year plan from what we did last year, okay? So last year, we did a 5-year plan.
Yes.
That's not good for 4 years.
Yes.
We're coming up with a new plan for 5 years. We're adding one more year,
Yes.
okay?
Yeah.
So I think it's appropriate we follow the current plan we had, which is a very comprehensive and cognitive plan, looking at a balanced scorecard we do. We end up identifying what our strategic objectives are. We've had numerous conversations in the strategic planning meeting, which are not necessarily captured in all this right here. We are definitely providing the message to our staff that we're not interested in raising taxes on here, but if there is a significant issue that's going on, I don't want to put handcuffs on them saying they're not going to bring it up, because when we need it, we got to bring it up.
I'm not saying they shouldn't bring it up. I'm just saying from a planning standpoint, 3 years ago, we were planning to have a tax rate of 33 cents.
Understand?
We changed our mind because it made sense to change our mind, and we reduced it by a
Okay, with that
dollar.
example right there, if you're saying let's follow the same process we did before, where you got a problem with either if it needs to be lowered or raised or whatever it requires to make sure we're doing this cognitively and appropriately, I got no problem with that.
Well, and all I'm saying is that 5-year plan, we should not put in a planned tax increase in FY '27 or '28 now, as we look at a 5-year plan. And the other thing I would suggest is that in no year should our expenses exceed our revenues. That's not my original idea. I got that from John Taylor, who skilled me in that. But because at some point, there was a place in the projections where our expenses were exceeding revenues.
Okay, so 1 year you decide to buy a fire truck.
Say
Let's
that.
just say, for example, you decide to buy a fire truck.
Right.
Okay? And that is a $1.8 million purchase.
Right?
And the next year, you're not going to buy a fire truck because you realize you bought the fire truck the year before, so you're going to lower the expenses down about $900,000. Let's say you did it half and half or something. But in that first year, you exceeded the revenues.
And the net result would be that our fund balance would never drop from where it is right now.
I'm missing what you're saying.
If we had a policy that said our expenses will never exceed revenues,
In an annual, in 1 year.
we will never decrease our fund balance.
It's not,
I think it's the operating expenses,
It's-
not
yes,
capital expenses.
Yes, it's the operating expenses, not capital. I'm sorry. I should have been specific. I wasn't talking about, not
okay.
capital.
Well,
not
that
capital
does
expenses.
change it some when you're just talking about the operating expenses on there. Again, though, we have a process that's been working very well. Okay, we've been recognized many, many times on our process. We are very sound fiscally. This is a step for the balanced scorecard to give a focus on where we want to look at certain things. Doesn't mean that's the only place we're going to be, as we just had the conversation. We can amend things. I've got no desire to have outrageous budgets or raise taxes or anything else. I want a very comprehensive approach. We've done that in the past. And as you just stated, we dropped our tax rate.
Yep.
Okay? And that was the right thing to do. So let's keep on this process that seems to be working pretty well right now.
And dropping the tax rate was the result of a recommendation that came from staff. It
Yes.
wasn't directed from council, all right? We're doing our job.
No one's questioning you doing your job.
When we bring a plan to you, it's
Yeah.
going to be what we think it needs to be financially in order to achieve the results of the priorities that you set during the strategic planning retreat. What you're advocating for now is, okay, disregard everything you told us about priorities in the strategic planning retreat and just focus on tax rate. It's not about results, it's about how much the tax rate is.
No. Well, it is about how much the tax rate is, but the discussions we had in the retreat We didn't make a firm decision on a fire truck. We didn't make a firm decision. Matter of fact, we're waiting for more information about the location of fires so we can make a decision about whether we have a third fire station or we have an emergency type station.
All of those inputs go into our budget development process and our 5-year plan development process to see if we can achieve the results that were drafted, okay, by council during the strategic planning retreat. Yes, things can change, and they do change as this thing unfolds over the coming months. But we're trying to achieve the results that you told us to try to achieve.
Can I ask, I don't know if it's a higher or lower level question, I'm not sure. Clearly, the approval of the balanced scorecard with the areas of focus and the IAPs are fiscal 25 to 29, have budgetary implications. But we are not here to talk about the budget per se tonight. And in fact, fresh off my ethics training, because this is a special meeting, I don't think we can. We can't add
Can't
agenda
deviate
items
from
to
what was
this.
on the agenda, right?
If there were a motion made now just to approve the balanced scorecard and so forth, I don't think that says anything about whether the growth rate of operating expenses should be greater or less than revenues and the 5-year capital budgeting process. I don't think. Yes, it puts some things on paper as a plan. We got $400,000 to design something on West Linden Road to be determined. And that's out in fiscal 28 or whatever, but we're not really, this is not a budgetary conversation,
Right.
I think.
I'm fine with that. I agree with that. But I think it's important, excuse me, I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the connection between the decisions we make from a strategic planning process and the implications they have on our budget and the tax rate on our residents.
But if we, in
And we
the,
provided that linkage during the strategic planning retreat by showing you the 5-year financial forecast.
Yes. And
That was the appropriate time to have that conversation.
and I think you'll recall that I asked that we take a look at it without the increase in FY '27 from the current 24 to the 25, which I received.
And we provided you that
You
feedback.
did. You did.
No further conversation about it.
No, well, I wasn't going to have it until we gathered and had a full council and so forth. But that's, to me, that's going to be a focus. Go ahead.
If I may.
we will undoubtedly revisit a number of these issues, and as a result of whatever comes out of that discussion, that may effectively change whatever we may approve something tonight, and then a month from now or
That's
3
right.
months from now. it
Correct.
could
Might change your, yeah.
So I think that the imperative now is to approve what we have if we're comfortable that it accurately reflects, although it may not go into the level of detail on the budget, which, again, will be a topic maybe as early as
Right.
a week from now or soon,
Okay.
I think.
Yes, and so, and I think that's a valuable piece there, John, is that today what we're asking for is, through this conversation, looking at the balanced scorecard, looking at where we're moving forward, where we think we're going to be going, the areas of focus specifically for FY 25. If you all feel comfortable with the document as it is, with the conversation about goals versus projections as a part of it, what we will do, again, is take this document and use it as one of the kickoff documents for our budgeting conversation. So we will be using this as one of the beginning steps to have the department level conversations where departments will begin to look at what does the budget look like, what potential projects, evaluations that are necessary, how do they align, where's their misalignment, et cetera. And through that budgetary process, other priorities, competing priorities may come up, and again, council may provide various direction. But this helps us now to be able to start the budgetary process at the end of January to get us going with the direction that council has provided.
Okay. Then I would offer one amendment under the initiative action plans, safeguarding the community. The page is not numbered. It's IAPs. deliver effective fire and rescue services. It says design, build, staff, and equip Fire Station 93.
If I may, Pat, I'm sorry. So these are two separate conversations. I'm asking for a motion to approve specifically the balanced scorecard. The other, then if it's okay with council, to move to the IAP for those potential changes and updates.
Oh, I thought we were going to approve the whole package at once.
So the IAPs technically won't be approved this evening, and the rationale for that is because, based off of the areas of focus and our budgetary conversations, we may come, as staff, may recommend a slight variation in some of these areas, because making the budget work may mean tough decisions about a timeline. So
Well,
that's why it's more.
let me
fitting your
finish what I
direction.
was going to propose, so that in those discussions, you can factor that in. I think the language under initiative action plans for safeguarding the community should say design, build, staff, and equip Fire Station 93, or an emergency, if that's the proper word, rescue station, which is part of the discussion we had at the strategic retreat as we were awaiting information about number of fires, where they're located geographically, et cetera, et cetera. So,
I recognize where the angst is coming from there, given the conversation.
it's in red, it's the only thing I have to change.
From staff perspective, whether we put a rescue truck or an engine in there, it's still going to be Fire Station 93. It's going to be staffed by firefighters. But if you want to call it something different in order to more effectively communicate with our constituents, maybe something like design, build, and staff a third fire department facility.
I would be fine with that.
I would be fine with that.
Okay?
That just, in the document we discussed, there was a picture of a big red truck.
Yeah.
As long as we're not committed to a big red truck, although we may end up with one,
Yep.
right? An ambulance can't squirt water on the fire, but a fire truck can provide emergency.
And it won't be an ambulance.
I understand.
Yeah.
Part of what we need to find out.
Non-big red truck.
Yeah. It'll be a less large red truck.
And it might be a smaller building.
Certainly, because you're talking about two-thirds of the staff and a little bit smaller.
Which would reduce
vehicle.
costs.
Does that mean that we have this as a package proposal again, the balanced scorecard including?
Based on what Jeff Sanborn just injected. I'm fine with that language.
I have no problem with the language change.
But we're only approving the balanced scorecard. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes, sir. So just for the record, if I may get consensus from council, the language would be design, build, staff, and equip a third fire station facility, or a fire department facility.
Fire department
Sorry, fire
facility.
department facility. Is that, if I may, just, okay,
I'm fine.
That's fine.
3? Barb and Jack, if I may, just, is that okay with you all as well?
Yeah, good.
I will make that update. But yes, so also, again, this is a part of that IAP conversation is potential timing, if you have any questions, any issues with the IAPs as they are. But again, that, if I may, it's sometimes a little easier to separate that conversation from the actual potential passage of the motion concerning the balanced scorecard.
Are we willing to consider a motion?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I was straightening my paper.
I would move to approve the fiscal year 2025 balanced scorecard, including the fiscal year 2025 areas of focus and the fiscal year 2025 to 2029 initiative action plans with language, with amended language as agreed.
I'll second that.
Okay, hearing a motion in a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? None. Hearing none, it's adopted.
Thank you all.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is public comments. Are there any public comments? I saw one person who I thought wanted to make a public comment depart. But I made a note to contact him. Good. Thank you. We have, I'll call his name, but I think he's left. We have Tom Stewart. Is he with his wife? He's gone, okay. And then we have Carlos St. Germain. What'd she say? Please.
Departed.
Yes, I was just wondering what I thought she had said something. Carla, please identify yourself officially and speak into the microphone
Hi.
and tell us your address.
Carla St. Germain, 5 Oak Court, Pinehurst, North Carolina. Hey, I am really happy to see the passion that the council has for the village. It's really great to see that. One of the things, I know this is not really on your agenda, but it is clear that there are a lot of things that are going to happen around the U.S. Open that will affect our community and our village merchants. And I'm not sure how many of you were actually here and in the village for the 2014 Opens, so I wanted to just ask that question. And did you come into the village during the U.S. Opens?
Yes.
I live in the village, so yes.
Yes, so did I.
So,
I mean, I can walk into the village, so yes.
perfect. So do you recall the public-private partnership that the village participated in during the U.S. Opens?
I don't.
I know Jack probably does. You
Yep.
were pretty integral in a lot of that.
I was in the archives a lot, yep.
So just to give you a sense of some of the things that were tried to encourage that participation, the village participated in creating a beautiful piece that was sent to every single resident, was provided to all of the short-term rentals, all the hotels, that encouraged all of the entertainment opportunities that were provided into the village. It was kind of a partnership between the USGA and public-private pieces. Some were very effective, some not so much. Symphony, really effective. Royal Tattoo with all the wonderful pipes and drummers, very effective. Some of the small pieces that the USGA did with movies and documentaries and things, not as effective. We also did a social district, is what they call it now, so that there was walking with beverages, you might recall, so that people could come through the village on a regular basis and do that. We provided a map with an electronic piece that also encouraged people to come to the village. And we had 200 ambassadors for the village that ended up being really useful simply for, if nothing else, transportation in the heat of the day to ensure that people were well hydrated and were not walking from the one entrance that allowed them into the village all the way in and all the way back to get to their vehicles. So there were a number of things that were done to really encourage that participation by both the community and the tourism pieces to get them to what we think is our gem, which is our village. And so I wanted you to think about what your goal and objective is. I know you'll probably be hit by a number of different opportunities, the Golf Channel just being one of those. And what does perfect look like? If the village had a perfect opportunity to introduce themselves to not only community, because there are a lot of people that live in the community that don't frequent the village. We see it all the time. And those that have never been to the village, that make that gem something that is really unique. So I just wanted you to think about what that goal might look like.
What would it look like to you?
I would love to see the opportunity for people to get into the village and to make them feel like the village is open and available to them. I think there's a preconception and maybe a misconception that the village streets will be closed, that there will be no parking available.
I think we put that to rest about the village streets about an hour ago, but go right ahead.
But getting that past the perception.
Right.
And they also probably think, too, that it's going to be so crowded that why would I want to go down to the village and support the village? And we know that that was really not the case. And so it's trying to encourage that opportunity. and make sure that we get the message out and that there's an invitation to come to the village.
I think you'll find
I
a lot.
assume that a separate topic later on in some other session will be the village's event
Plans.
and/or plans to promote the village during the open. I assume that will be one of the topics in
Yeah.
the future. Is that correct?
Yeah, Jeff, maybe you can find the right time on a future work session or something where we can either brainstorm or some proposal or ideas can come forward and we can discuss it whenever. Okay. There you go, Jack. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Moving right along. We are now at the discussion of library construction project potential timeline. So there must be somebody here. Doug, yes.
So the question was asked of me, how long will it take for us to go from where we are now and the library construction process to moving dirt and actually starting construction? So it's 6 months from whenever we finalize all the details on the cost of what we want to spend until we're moving dirt. So it'll be between finishing the construction plans, bidding them out, and working out the negotiations and the contract with the contractor. That will take 6 months.
Can you bring up that chart? It was a good chart. I don't have it handy. There we go. Okay. I had one question I remember scribbling down is, that's telling us when we turn over the first shovel of dirt.
Right.
When do we cut the ribbon and go into the library with our key?
To the library, I mean, it's probably at least 12 months of actual construction.
12 months of construction, okay.
At least.
At least.
Yeah.
That's based on the,
Just what it usually costs to, or the timeline it usually takes to construct a new building.
so hypothetically, if we were to start in this coming, now prepare the bids as August, what we have here, open the bids. If we were to start on October 1 of 2024, we theoretically could be finished by October 1 of 2025.
Probably sometime in 2025, yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm not trying to pin it down to a day. I'm just trying to get a ballpark idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Council members, any questions or?
If memory serves, you were attempting to arrange a separate meeting.
Yeah, I haven't.
Did that happen? Or?
No, I mentioned to Jeff Sanborn that I did, was contacted by Stuart Mills, and he had a conversation with a gentleman from Capital Development, and they're putting together some plan or proposal, and they would get back to us whenever they had it completed. There wasn't a real hard date, but it was a soft date of maybe March.
Yeah, to that point, given Tufts' organization is in March, will have their report done, and they will at that time have a good feel of how much money they think they are able to contribute to the project.
I guess the question outstanding, the council last year made a determination of the site we picked and a single-story building. The artist's conception, we all agreed, was just a filler by the architect is what it might look like, but it was I shouldn't use that phrase, might look like. It was just a filler of what some library looks like. It wasn't necessarily what ours might look like. I think what's missing a little from this, we have two decisions to really make on the library remaining, big ones. One has to do with the cost, which continually evolves, and the square footage. And I gave this some thinking, went back and read library IQ assessment and all those things. And I think if we're going to get into the, and we will, the idea of preparing contract documents and all, we need to provide some guardrails for these folks as to what are they building? What are they working on? Where's a budget? What's the sizes of the building? So I made an attempt to come up with something because I haven't, seen something that I thought was rather firm. And so I'd like to share it with my colleagues now. Nothing I'm asking anyone to vote on or do anything of that nature, but I do think it's worthwhile that we have a discussion. Otherwise, we continue along this track of we don't know what's going to happen there. And it is probably the most significant capital item in our budget over the next couple of years. I can't think of anything more important to this council over the next 2 years as to a major expenditure, unless I'm missing something, other than this library, and then what will follow on to it, which would be the archives. So I'm in attempting to put some parameters around this. I think because we would be going back to the architect to say, hey, produce something a little more firmer. So here are my thoughts. I think we should give them a range, okay? And I think the range should be at a minimum 100% increase in the size of the library from its current square footage of 3,825 square feet to 7,650, all the way up to a range of 120% larger, which would be up to 8,400 square feet, which is a number we tossed around because that's the square footage of what the archives, the building itself will be for the archives when it becomes vacant. And in a range from money, and I put a question mark around this because I think this residents are going to, eventually, we're going to have to confront this idea of what is the amount of money we're going to spend. But I think the range should be somewhere in the neighborhood of what we have had in our budget, which is 4.6 million, to probably 5.2. And I think there are some other particulars that we know we want our new library to have that they don't have now. We want them to have designated parking spots. They've gone 60 years without one designated parking spot, and I think we've talked about a number of at least 30. And I would like to remind the architect, we got to make sure that a school bus can pull into that driveway at the library in anticipation that there may be school buses dropping off kids. We definitely want to be sure that there's room for expansion, which the library has not had for 60 years. I think we also need to determine just how much shelf space is necessary and how many more books, knowing we probably have an increase of books from what we have now. I've been trying to pin down that number. I think we have about a volume of 15,000. But we ought to put a parameter where maybe it goes up to 20 or 25, because shelf space takes up a lot of space. And I also think that we need to be sure, and I don't know how to put this other than that they know we want it to look like Pinehurst. I think they know that, and I think everybody in the village, what we want is people, when they see the final artist conception, to nod their heads. That will make what we do go through and what we spend probably a lot more acceptable than if they see something that they say that doesn't look like Pinehurst. So anyway, those are some thoughts I've had, and I'm just trying to move the process along, and I welcome any comments from my colleagues.
A question for you. Where'd you get these recommendations from?
I said these are my recommendations.
Okay, well, let's go to more specifics. You recommend the size be 100 to 120% of the archives.
Yeah.
Why?
No, I recommended the size be, for the library, 100 and to 120% more square footage than they have now.
That's what I just said.
I didn't
Okay,
hear that.
so I'm sorry if I
You said
misphrased that.
archives.
Okay, so the size of the library should be 100% to 120% of what the archives are.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you get that?
Well, hold on. I went to, let me get to the Library IQ page, and I will tell you exactly where I got it from. I'm trying to find the chart. They had a chart of a average municipal library size in the
Okay.
state of North Carolina. And it was 8,036 square feet for a municipality within the population of ours, 15 to 25,000.
Okay.
So that's where it caught my eye as a possibility.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate knowing where it's from. Now, just counterpoint, we brought in a company to assess what the needs were, and they looked at the needs and they gave us an assessment for that.
Yes.
And you identifying this from the graph, I'm not sure that's going to be a more accurate assessment or recommendation to meet the needs of our community than what the professional organization just did for
Well,
us.
let me address that. That was a pre-COVID needs assessment.
Okay.
It was completed prior to March 25th, 2020, when the President of the United States declared a pandemic.
I heard that.
Okay? And in the survey data, one of the things I found that I did not realize until I reread this last week is that the survey that they engaged in with an online survey with 386 Pinehurst residents, which they called obviously statistically valid. The survey successfully reached both library users and non-users. Fair. 63% of the respondents had used the library during the past 12 months. Now, we know from the ETC survey that the number is the opposite of that percentage of who've used them in the last 12 months. The number of used them in the last 12 months has consistently been for the last 3 years about 40%. That's fine. I'm in that 40%. And the non-users were 60. So I took that survey, that part of their survey, with a real grain of salt, more than a grain.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, you also addressed that this is one of the biggest capital expenditures we have in the next couple of years, which I totally agree with.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I mentioned in the strategic meeting was that if there's enough concern that we're not meeting those needs, why don't we get another survey that's done and look at it?
Well, I'm not a big fan of another survey.
Okay. I know there's no regret there. My point is you're pulling up data here, recommendations.
Yes.
And quite frankly, while I respect everything you've done professionally, deciding on what the size of the library is going to be to meet the needs of our community, I'm not sure that that's your expertise, and we've got this other company that's been doing it. Now, we have to make decisions on what we think is the right way to go. But I'm looking at that, I'm looking at the price limitations that you have there, and I don't want to spend more money. Trust me, I don't.
Yeah?
Okay? And that we're looking on things. But we're also going down a process which we're having people give us estimates on what it's going to be.
Which is why I included ranges in here.
Okay.
I didn't include a hard figure. And
Again, though, the ranges you're pulling up,
yes,
I question how you're developing those.
I've developed them from going through their assessment. Their assessment we were provided one.
So you're looking at building cost and you're assessing, okay, the building cost for 100 to 120% of the archive square footage should end up being this amount, is that what you're telling me?
I'm telling you that we began this process with a $3.5 million budget.
I got it.
Well,
I understand the
well,
creep.
you may
What I'm
get
not
it.
seeing, though, is I'm not seeing your expertise in being able to identify what the budget should be.
I'll tell you what my expertise is. I put together 11 budgets at $12 billion a year in my 11 years at the Department of Labor. I
Okay,
oversaw.
I understand.
Okay?
Good. You've done some budgeting process. I'm talking about specifically the library here.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
And what you're talking about doing is putting limitations on what our staff's supposed to do. All they're asking for right now is just a timeline. That's it.
I understand what they're asking, and I agree, I like this product that they produced.
Okay.
I asked for an additional question as to whether or not, when to turn the key, and Doug and Jeff gave a reasonable number of when we can think that could
Okay,
happen.
I'm happy to
But one
go
of the
forward with
things
this, but I
wanna-
want them to do their job.
One of the things I want to avoid is this paralysis by analysis that goes on when we stretch out these time periods of discussing these topics. We have been.
There's one thing that I think the staff needs. It's in order to go ahead and prepare contracts, and that's the parameters, obviously. When we talk to building a contract and so forth, we need to know the functional requirements of the library. We probably do need to give them a range of sizes that our expectation is. We probably wouldn't hurt, if we can, give them a range of costs if possible. Maybe some parameters that we think are important, like access to parking or school buses. We've picked a location and submitted another bunch of parameters that basically more expert library peoples can put together, which is what do we expect the building to be used for and things like that. And so I think if we generate all those parameters and functional requirements, then we have enough to create a document that we can give to people that they can, in fact, utilize to create bids. So-
Jack, I
So
understand
that's where
that,
we are
but-
right now. I don't think we're in the stage of deciding exactly the size. Maybe at some point in time, it would be interesting to come back and hear the suggested range of sizes or the range of functions or something like. And then before we get, within a few months, before we get too far along this process.
I think that what would be most helpful to this process as we contemplate approaching these folks to do the design work would be a target size and a target budget. And I say that because if you give them a range of size and a range of budget, they don't know what they're designing, right? So, but you got to give them something relatively concrete to
Yeah,
start
a
from,
target
so that
might
they can
work,
bring
sure.
back a draft product to you. And if you don't like the resulting cost, or you don't like or whatever about it, then you can give them direction about what to change.
Yeah, no, that's a good suggestion. I just didn't want to get into the iterative, the process of iteratively,
Yeah.
they provide something, we don't like
Yeah.
it, they provide something else. I've seen this particularly with consultant activity. You get into these back and forths that take forever to get completion.
But that really is the point of this showing you this information, is that, so if we think that we can get to the point of giving them that basic information by 1 April, then it might be possible for us to start construction.
Well, do we have a list of exactly what information you need to go forward?
So you're right, we need to determine the size, and that's going to drive the cost. So one thing that, the architect's working on things, they got the survey, they're doing some work right now. What I don't want to do is say, okay, here's we have this much money, go design a building for this size, when we don't have a number from the Given Tufts organization yet. I don't want to tell them to cut back the building, and then in 3 months tell them to, expand the building again.
Let me make a comment on that. I think we've got to be very careful of linking what we're going to produce for our residents to what the Given Tufts folks think they can raise. We've got a history of their fundraising ability. There's nothing wrong with that. They raise money, but they raise about $180,000 a year based on their 990s. There were, a couple of years ago, they were going to, one of the documents had in there a plug of $1 million. You guys might remember it. Okay. You're shaking your head from Given stuff. It didn't materialize. But
So the plan all along has been that they would do a fundraising drive now that we're at this point. And I don't know how much they're going to raise.
I don't know either.
But the $180,000, that was for ongoing operation costs. That wasn't their capital drive that they're currently
No, but
trying to
that
go
was what they
through.
would raise every year.
But to state the obvious, thinking just about this timeline, they're not going to have an estimate from their consultant on fundraising until sometime in March, not necessarily the 31st, but sometime in March. And whatever it is they think they can raise, whatever that number is, it's not going to be raised by August 1st.
Certainly not. And
I don't think.
There's a lot of chicken and egg here, right? Because
Yes.
In order for them to build their fundraising campaign, they got to know what they're trying to sell,
Right.
right? So
And by the same token, we.
is it a wing on, is it an expansion wing on the library, or is it interior beautification, or a larger book selection? Or what is it? And
Fundraising is an expertise, I would say, that I have, because I've raised a lot of money for a lot of different things, not just professionally, but,
I guess what I'm saying is this, it's going to be hard for us to get to 1 April with that information if we don't start
well,
moving forward with something.
this contract documents, kind of following up on Jack's point, of trying to create, understand the parameters you feel you need to get a product that somebody could raise money against or that we could commit money against. Contract documents, does that allow time to further iterate, or do you think you need to really have this pinned down on 1 April so you can actually start, not soliciting bids, that's later, but.
The contract documents is them designing it, the blueprints, developing all that. So they need a pretty firm.
But that's a
point.
specific charge to them. Go, here's the budget, here's the size we'd like. You may come back with something slightly different, but this is what we would like. Now, how close can you come?
Who's preparing the contract documents?
That's the architect.
I'm sorry?
Architect.
Okay.
They clearly need to have all these parameters before they can go very far.
Right. And so, so everyone's clear, they gave us what they had interviews with the council, they had interviews with members of the library community, and they came up with a number of 9,250 square feet that they felt like met our needs. So if we're going to go back to them and say, we want it more in the range of 8,400 square feet, they're going to ask us what we want to cut. So we would need to provide that to them.
Have they given us any construction estimate per square foot?
Yeah, it's 450 square feet.
$450 a foot.
Yeah.
My concern on that, for the previous conversations we're having, I don't want to spend, let's just throw a number out between your range, $5 million, and not be fulfilling the needs of our community. Okay, I want to make sure that what we're spending it on is being reasonably spent to make sure we're meeting a goal of the library, which is going to fulfill the needs. And that's what I'm at. Okay. Giving parameters as described as to what you're kind of looking at and things like that, I think it's appropriate. If we're having this conversation and we just say that, hey, we only want to pay for 8,200 square feet, then we need to make sure we're hearing from the subject matter experts on there saying, okay, what are you going to cut? And is that something that legitimately can be cut without affecting the utilization of it that is going to fulfill a need for our community? Okay?
I think we have to keep in mind where we are and where we're going. We're not cutting anything. We are proposing a robust, brand-new, state-of-the-art library, twice the size of the current square footage, parking they never had, additional staff, and building in the availability of expansion. So if some reason needs are not met, okay, we don't have to go begging around to find more space. It's right there, and we can add on to it. Just like we did with the community center.
I agree with the expansion capability for that, and the community is going to change. The projections are all about it getting bigger, Pioneer's growing. Let's just make sure that we're wisely spending the money right now to fulfill the needs of what's been determined, okay? And if you don't think we need it, then I guess we need to have that conversation, okay, as to what's going to be done. I certainly support this timeline that's there. I caution the council, let's not make a decision where we're spending money and not fulfilling the needs of what our community is, period.
I too support the timeline. We have been at this for several years now, and say the least, but we've been at it. And I think we need to build a library that's within the means and the desires of our residents from a fiscal standpoint as well as a professional standpoint. And I think if we don't put some good parameters around this, we'll keep bouncing around a discussion, or maybe we'll end up with a vote on how much to spend and how many square feet. But I'd like to see what they produce. Okay. Anything else? Do you need anything else from us right now?
No, I'm all set.
You're set. Okay. I thank Mike. You have a comment, John?
Do we need anything else from them?
No, not that I know of at this moment. Does anybody have a question or request from Doug?
We'll put a topic on the next work session about this size, cost.
Sure.
and we can-
Whatever's the next one, whatever you think is good. I thank my colleagues for the discussion, because we haven't had a good discussion on this for a good while. And yeah, a really good discussion.
Couple weeks.
Well, not where we got down to some dollar figures like this.
I seem to recall we've been going round about this for like 3 or 4 years, but
There you, well, that's predates me, but yes, which is this part of this idea of it keeps dragging out, not blaming anybody, but we started with a number, the number's gotten larger, and we need to make some.
If I could end this on a happy note, one of the things that came up in conversation with the mayor of Cornelius was they decided they wanted to build a performing arts center in the town. And the village committed $4 million to that extent, and they raised $21 million privately, including a $5 million pledge from someone who wanted to.
got the right sell, yeah.
He pointed out, the town has, he said, 75 miles of frontage on Lake Norman. And there's some very, very large houses, then there's some, we're not going to be able to budget along those lines, but I would absolutely echo, I want to be sure whatever we dedicate to it, that at the end of the day, we are happy with it, and more importantly, that the people who paid those taxes ultimately are happy with it as well, so.
Thank you.
The only
Comment?
comment I would make to council is, and I've been in this library thing now for, before I was a child, I think, but it seems like. But we have a timeline. Let's do everything reasonably possible to make sure we meet these timelines and we move fast on this thing, because it's the village, I think, has been waiting a long time for the promise to be fulfilled. Let me tell you that.
Thank you for those comments, Jack. I think we've finished the topic, and we'll take it up again in a week or 2 weeks, whatever it is, 3 weeks. And so I'll entertain a motion to recess the special meeting and enter into closed session.
I move to recess the special meeting and enter into a closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A5 to establish or to instruct the public body's staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Any discussion? No. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break and then go into the closed session. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. Thank you. We'll be clearing the room. Thank you.